Welcome back to Bill's Ramblings. Today I want to tell you the story about how my wife tried to kill me back in 2003. Um, she tried to kill me with an elephant, and that's a great story in itself. Now, I've mentioned how much I love my wife, and I hope you can accept that, she loves me too, even though I might be a lot of trouble and a lot of stuff like that. But, she loves me as much as I love her, probably more. And so this story takes place in Botswana, Africa, in 2003. Well, let me start by saying we're going to go back to my wife and I were called into full-time missions back in 2001. We felt the call of God into our lives to become missionaries, and it wasn't necessarily an easy decision for us. I mean, we had two small boys, and we had a life that we were living. We had a Appaloosa horse farm facility. We had we had a lot of rabbits. We were raising we had 1,000 rabbits. So we had a life that was progressing right along the lines that we had always wanted it to. And when we heard the call of God on our lives to go into full-time missions, it took some praying and it took some thinking, and we talked to people in our lives, our pastor and our members of our church. And I won't get into all that right now, but I'll tell you that neither Cindy or I were raised Christians. We weren't Christians. I was raised in a Southern Baptist family, in a Southern Baptist church. And, I knew the church my whole life. And in fact, when I was 12 years old, I actually walked the aisle and I made a profession of faith and was shortly after that baptized. And I ran into a little conflict with some people about doctrinal issues regarding that, because I've maintained all the way up until the time I was 30 years old, which is when I believe I actually got saved. Prior to 30, when the Holy Spirit really got a hold of me, there was no change in my life. I attended church. I went to Bible studies and I read my Bible, kind of. And but I would tell you that my life as a picture did not at all convey a sense of a new creation. I was pretty much the same old creation I always was. I got in a lot of trouble. I did a lot of bad things. God was not a focus in my life, and certainly serving Jesus wasn't either. But right about the time I turned 30 or in that area, the Holy Spirit got a hold of me, and I got saved, and Cindy got saved also. That's a whole nother story. I'll tell you that later. Look forward to that. But anyway, in 2001, God called us into full-time missions, and we joined a mission organization based in Florida. And in 2002, we left the U.S., presumably for good. We had no intention of coming back. We had made the decision that if we went to Africa, and if we were going to die in Africa, then that was okay, because that was going to be God's will on our life. And so we accepted it, and away we went to South Africa, and we ended up in South Africa in 2002. Now I'm going to tell you a kind of a sub story, because it's real short, and it fits in really well here. And we had been in Africa for probably about 4 months. And we were missing home pretty bad. We were missing our friends and our family and our church, and we were missing the United States. Certainly Africa is not the United States, and not the life that we had been living. So we were pretty homesick. We were lonely, and this is where this takes place. We had to go to the U.S. Embassy in Pretoria to get some tax documents so that we could file our taxes, and we wanted to go ahead and be able to vote in the upcoming election. And so we made a trip down to Pretoria, and we went to the embassy, and we walked into the embassy, and I don't know if anybody's ever experienced this like we did, but we walked into the embassy, Cindy and I did, and once you get into that initial door, we walked in, and there was a Marine, a U.S. Marine in dress blue, standing at full attention, standing there at the opening to the embassy. And we stopped dead in our tracks. We stopped right there, right in front of this Marine. And I'm not ashamed to tell you that we stood there and cried. We cried with tears streaming down our face, just looking at this U.S. Marine. Now, I'll tell you that he personified everything that was America to us at that time. And, we've commented to ourselves and even to some other people, I wonder how many times that Marine saw American citizens come in there and do the same thing, that you go in there and you just cry. And we had missed the U.S. for so bad. But out of that, God renewed the decision that we made to follow him under no turning back and no going back to where we were going. We were headed to where God wanted us. Well, the ministry organization wanted us to move from South Africa to Zambia. And we had gone about the business of purchasing a big truck, a 2-ton truck that had small sides on the side of it, not a flatbed, but it had about 18-inch sides on it. In South Africa, they called it a lorry. And it was a small cab. It only held 2 people, three people if you count one adult and a couple children. And so here we were making these plans to drive from South Africa up to Zambia, across the Zambezi River and into Zambia. And we put all our possessions, which basically consisted of a whole bunch of big duffel bags. We had our whole life stuffed into these probably 8 or 10 duffel bags, and we piled them into the back of this lorry. And we put a tarp over the back of it to keep the rain and stuff out. And we made the decision to go through Botswana because even though Zimbabwe was a faster route, there was a lot of political unrest at the time, and we didn't want to take a chance on having any problems. And so we kind of went the long way, and we went up north out of South Africa, turned left, and went into Botswana. And we traveled along the Zimbabwe border, getting up to the Zambezi River. Well, this is where the story takes place about this elephant attack, and what we would do is I would drive the truck for a while, and Cindy would sit in the cab next to me, and the 2 boys would sit in the back of the truck as we went on down the road. And we got stopped the first night and stayed at a hotel there. And anyway, the next morning we were leaving, and it was kind of raining off and on. And so Cindy, she was going to go ahead and drive, and the boys would be up in the cab with her. And I was riding in the back of the truck up against the duffel bags. And since it had been raining, I was underneath the tarp. And Cindy and I had a couple walkie-talkies so we could talk to each other. And at a time when there wasn't any rain, I was sitting outside the tarp. And I used to put my feet up on the bed of the side of the truck. And I radio up to Cindy, and I said, "Hey, Cindy, you know that on the Zimbabwe side of this border is a giant game park. And they don't have any fences, and those animals are just running wild." And I said, "So you just keep your eyes out and see if you can't find any wild animals and stuff." And she said, "Well, I haven't seen anything. I haven't seen any animals, and I haven't seen anything that would even, are you sure?" And I said, "Well, actually, there's about 4 or 5 elephants that are crossing the road behind us about 2 miles back." And she's like, "Oh, well, okay, I'll just go ahead and keep my eye out for those wild animals." And so it started raining again. So I got back underneath that tarp and stayed in there, kind of dozed off and was sleeping. And all of a sudden the truck stopped, and I thought, I wonder what that's all about. So I poked my head out of the tarp, and it wasn't raining. So I climbed out of the tarp, and I was sitting there with my feet up on the sides of the truck again. And Cindy says, "Okay, Bill, there's your elephant." And she turned the truck off. I don't know why she did that, but she did. She turned that truck off, and there was a big bull elephant off the side of the road back in the bushes a little ways, and he had some pretty good sized tusks, and he was just minding his own business back there eating and, kind of leisurely standing around. I could see that he was looking at us out of the corner of his eyes. He wasn't that far away. I'll bet he wasn't more than maybe 60, 80 yards away. And everything was all nice and peaceful and no problems. And the boys decided they needed to get out of the truck to start snapping some pictures. And the elephant didn't seem to mind that at all. And one of the boys, he needed a different angle. And so he stepped probably about 20 feet away from the truck to get a different angle on that elephant. And boy, I'll tell you what, that's when it got excited. That bull elephant said, all right, I've had enough. I had enough of you people. And he didn't like that. And he took off running. And he started trumpeting. He got his trunk in the air. And he's trumpeting all over the place. And his ears are flapping. And I grabbed the radio and I said to Cindy, I said, go, you need to go. This elephant's going to get me. Well, that elephant, he got smack dab in the middle of the road. And I'll tell you what, that if you think an elephant can't move, you're mistaken. That elephant was covering that ground fast. And I think that he had a bullseye right on my forehead. And he's thinking, if I could just get up to that truck, I'll just grab him with a trunk and I'm going to bang him on the ground like some kind of rag doll and just show him that he can't be doing this. Well, the thing is, I'm yelling in the radio for Cindy to get this truck going, and she's not doing anything. And I'm thinking, those horror movies where these people, they just can't start the truck and or the car or whatever, and then the car is going, and all of a sudden somebody dies in the situation. Well, that's what flashed through my mind was Cindy wasn't going to get that truck started, and I was going to die pretty quick. Well, she did manage to get it started, and she took off in that truck going pretty fast, and both boys managed to jump on the running board of that truck and get in and slam the door. And as we're speeding off, that elephant's still running down the road chasing us. And I don't know, she got down there maybe a quarter mile, and he stopped in the middle of the road. So I radio up to Cindy and I said, hey, Cindy, I said, he stopped, so you can go ahead and stop the truck now, and we can take a look at him again. And she said, Bill, you're nuts. You're absolutely crazy. There is no way I'm stopping this truck. We're on our way, and we're not doing that. And so we went on, and we made it to the Zambezi River that night, and we got to the border, and it was almost time to close. And they had a big ferry that went across the Zambezi River. Boy, it was like a mile across to the Zambezi at that time. It was the floodwaters were pretty high. The river was high, and so we managed to get on the last ferry going across over to Zambia, and we got up there, and immigration wouldn't let us come into the border because we didn't have a visa. And we said, well, what are we going to do now? And they said, well, that's really not our problem. You're going to have to go back to Botswana until you can get a visa. And we said, well, the ferry's stopped, and there's no way we can go back tonight. And they said, well, that's not our problem. You're not getting into Zambia at this time. And so we were forced to sleep in the truck. And we parked the truck down there by the river. It was a really beautiful spot. And we were down there just getting ready for the night. And Cindy was going to sleep in the cab, and the boys and I were going to sleep in the back of the truck underneath this tarp. And as we were preparing for the sun's going down, and a Zambia truck driver was in the river bathing, and he said, hey, you can't stay here in that truck. You can't park right there. And I said, what? I said, why? Why can't we park here? He said, well, you can if you want, but I'm going to tell you that the hippos are going to come up out of that river, and they're going to climb up in your truck and kill you. And I said, not a hippo is going to climb up in the truck and kill me. He said, well, I'm just telling you that you don't want to be sleeping there in the back of that truck. Those hippos are going to come get you. Well, if it wasn't bad enough that I almost got killed by an elephant, now I got to deal with these hippos. So I thought, let's just go ahead to the other end of the parking lot. And we drove the truck way over to the other side of the parking lot, as far away from the river as we could get. And we settled down for the night. And like I said, Cindy was in the cab sleeping, and the boys and I were sleeping in the back of the truck. And I'll tell you what, that truck driver was absolutely right. During the night, we could hear the hippos walking through the parking lot, and they make a kind of a grunting sound as they walk, and they were kind of rubbing up against the truck, and I was just waiting. I was just waiting for one of these big old behemoths to climb up into that truck and grab me and just pierce me with those big teeth. And well, again, I didn't die. I'm here right now to tell you the story. So God took care of us like he always does, and we were quite happy about that. We were glad that God always takes care of us. And the next morning we were able to get into the country, into Zambia, and we went on our way. And so that is the story of, well, both the hippo and the elephant in our travels. And that was an exciting trip to drive clear across Botswana into Zambia. I want to thank you for staying here with us on our video, and we look forward to seeing you again on the next one. Bye now.